Hi everyone, Stepan here. It's Thursday, so welcome to another Thursday Endgame video. In this week's video, I would like to do for the Endgame what I did for the middle game last week, and that's talk about the best books for the Endgame. I've been getting this request a lot, and especially since last week's video, I've been getting tons of messages to try to review the best Endgame books. So here it is. First, a disclaimer. These are my favorite books. This is my subjective opinion. It may not have to be true necessarily. Secondly, I'm not selling the books. I'm not affiliated with the authors in any way. So this is just what I think. The books that I found most useful in my own training. I'm going to talk about three books. The three books which are completely different. Each one is should be used on its own, should be used separately, and in my opinion, you should be using all three, and you would benefit most if you used all three. Now, the first thing I would like to say is that Endgame books are not really books in a sense that middle game or opening books are. You don't read them and leave them be on your shelf. You should use them as encyclopedias. You should use them as to reference your own games. You should use them constantly every time you play a game. You should consult your endgame books to see what the author says and whether you could find the endgame you played in one of the books. Okay, so I'm going to grade them from easy to hard. So one book is going to be for beginner level, one is going to be for intermediate level, and one is going to be for advanced level. Far more advanced than my level, in fact, but still very beneficial for all of us. That being said, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be using all books. It's just that one is harder than the other. Okay, so let's start. The first book, the first essential endgame book, which I find really useful, is the 100 Endgames You Must Know by Jesus de la Villa. That book is written simply. It's written to be understood by beginner players. It's not a beginner's book in a sense that the positions are easy. The positions are theoretical endgames, which are hard for everybody. Your strength doesn't really matter. The positions are complicated, but it's written in an easily understandable way. Now, Jesus de la Villa goes over what he thinks are 100 essential theoretical endgames. Of course, there are more theoretical endgames. He hadn't mentioned all of them. There are some endgames which I think are missing from the book, but basically, if you go over the 100 endgames he recommends, you will have the essential knowledge you need to play chess without losing instantly in the endgame. Now, the way in which the book should be used, in my opinion, is when you play a game, try to reference 100 endgames you must know, find the type of endgame you played, place it somewhere, categorize it, study the chapter he wrote on the endgame, and then move on. Now, a second way you could use the book is, of course, read it from beginning to the end, but then you should use what I talked about in the previous video. You should read the book properly, set up the positions over the board, go through all the variations, and try to understand everything. In my opinion, the best way to go through endgame books is to meet up with somebody, set up a board, and play the endgame against each other. So me and my friend Vlatko would set up the rook endgames from Jesus de la Villa's book and play them out against each other. He knows much more about rook endgames than I do, so it was more beneficial for me than for him. But he progressed too, because I would deviate from the book. He wouldn't know how to refute something that's bad, but it's not clear why. So 100 Endgames You Must Know is a great starting point. I believe the book is also available on Chessable if you don't want to read an actual book, but I think it would be better if you read the book. Now, the second book, and the book I learned from the most, is Amateur to IM by Jonathan Hawkins. Jonathan Hawkins is a person with no professional chess training. He never had strong coaches. He learned everything by himself, and he managed to progress to IM strength simply by mastering his endgames. And the book is special because Jonathan Hawkins is an incredible teacher. He's able to explain things concisely, and he gets to the point in every chapter. And every chapter you read, you feel like you got an eye-opener, and it's an aha, wow moment. At least it was for me. For example, one of my favorite things in the book, two of my favorite things from the book. One of them is reducing endgames to known elements. So, for example, you're playing a complex opposite colored bishop endgame where each side has a rook. Okay, so 1 bishop, 1 rook, 5 against 5. And then what you should do at the start of the endgame, you should reduce it to an element you know. For example, you remove the rook from the board in your mind and you try to understand whether the endgame is a win or a draw or whatever. And then what you can also do, you can remove the bishop and the rook from the board in your mind and see whether the pawn endgame is winning. The same technique could be applied to pawn endgames as well. So it's, let's say, 3 against 3, 1 pawn on the queen side, 2 pawns on the king side. You can remove the queen side pawns and ask yourself, would this endgame be a win or a draw if there were no queen side pawns? So this concept of simplifying the situation on the board to something you know theoretically is incredibly powerful, and it helps create plans. And that's one of my favorite techniques I learned from the book. The second one is creating little plans. Now, when we think about plans in chess, we think about grandmaster plans, and you have to calculate 10 moves deep, you have to know what's going to happen in 10 moves. No, that's wrong. What Jonathan Hawkins talks about is you have to create small plans which are doable, which you can execute easily. 1, 2, 3 move plans which your opponent is not going to be able to prevent, which are easy to visualize and easy to execute. So he teaches stuff like that. Apart from that, of course, he goes over theoretical endgames, rook endgames, there are tests, there are pawn endgames. The basics are explained incredibly well, and the book is an extraordinary resource. That being said, it's far more advanced than 100 endgames you must know. It's going to be more time consuming, more complicated, and it's going to require you to actually study it from start to finish. It's not a book you can reference like 100 endgames you must know. It's a book you have to read, and you have to grasp and understand the concepts. Okay, the third book is a book that everybody knows, everybody talks about. Very few people have read it, and an extremely low number of people have understood everything from the book. I would just like to say at the beginning, I understand very little from the book. I'm talking about Dvoretsky's Endgame manual. Now, I set out on a task on a 100-day Endgame challenge a few months ago. I'm at day 10 now. My goal is to finish the 100 days before the end of the year. So I don't have to do every day. I only have to do 100 days until the end of the year. So I am going to complete it. I'm actually continuing tomorrow. And the basic concept is I use these 3 books and 5 more books to study one type of endgame every day, and then I post a video about that and the PGN of Alice's study on Patreon. So the book I've been using the most is Dvoretsky's Endgame manual, and I use it because it's an encyclopedia of chess endgames. Everything is in there, and if you study Dvoretsky's Endgame manual from start to finish and you understand everything, you will probably play the endgame on a grandmaster level. Now, the book is so hard that it will usually take me almost an hour per page if I'm solving all the diagrams. It's usually 1 or 2 exercises per page. Some pages have texts which are the intro pages or something, but most are extremely difficult, and in most you have to calculate. Now, the book is divided into a lot of smaller chapters, and almost all chapters are accompanied by exercises, or at the end of one part there is a set of exercises. Now, Mr. Dvoretsky is one of the most famous Russian chess coaches, and he based his coaching techniques on things that are useful in practical play. So the book is supposed to be built around endgames which occur in practical play, and that is the case. However, unlike Amateur to IM or 100 endgames you must know, I chose this book as the advanced level endgame book because he goes into so much depth, and everything that could occur in a practical game has been explained in such a broad way and has been expanded with so many useful things and so many things that are highly unlikely to happen in a game, that by the time you finish a chapter, you finish a concept he is describing, you feel like you've been digging in a field for 20 hours. You feel exhausted, but it's still a remarkable resource. So for beginners, I would recommend 100 Endgames You Must Know. That's a great starting point. Go through the Endgames one by one. I think that book is easy to understand because it's divided into 100 chapters. You can do one per day, you can do two per day, and it's easily measurable. Your progress is measured easily. Then for intermediate players, Amateur to I Am by Jonathan Hawkins is a great book that's going to lift your endgame to a whole new level. And that level is going from I'm studying theoretical endgames to I'm beginning to understand concepts. I'm beginning to play using concepts that strong players use. And then finally, Dvoretsky's Endgame manual is sort of like polishing a gemstone. You already know a lot, but now you have to master it. So you should use Dvoretsky's Endgame manual to bring your level of expertise in the endgame from, let's say, 7 to 10, 10 being the highest. Now again, I think you should be using all three books. If you don't have them, get them. I think electronic versions are available. I think all three are available on Chessable too. That I'm not sure though. But my recommendation would be get physical copies, get the board, and every game you play, reference all three books. I'm sure that for most games you will find something in all three, and I think that's a great way to go about studying the endgame without just saying, oh, I'm going to go through 20 pages today. Play a game. Once you have an endgame, go through all three books, go through the chapter on that specific endgame. That's going to be a fun way to learn, and it's going to be very efficient. Okay, so I hope this helps. Let me know what you think. I would like to hear if there are some books that you like and I didn't mention. Of course, I use more books, but these three are my favorite. If I had to choose reading only 3 books on the endgame, I would choose these 3, definitely. Okay, thank you very much. See you tomorrow. Hope you liked the video and stay tuned for more chess. Bye-bye.